Hi, my name is Roz Smith, and I first came to St George's in 1994, and apart from a 5-year period when I was at another church, I've been worshipping here ever since. My chosen verses are from Deuteronomy, set at a time when the Israelites have been in the wilderness for many years, and Moses has had one of his God chats, so he's telling the people everything that God has told him. These verses were given to me in December 2010 in answer to prayer and a question I'd asked God. They were relevant to me then and continue to be so until last year. Deuteronomy chapter 1 verses 6 to 8. When we were at Mount Sinai, the Lord our God said to us, "You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Break camp and move on. Go to the hill country of the Amorites and to all the surrounding regions, to the Jordan Valley, to the hill country and the lowlands, to the southern region and to the Mediterranean coast. Go to the land of Canaan and on beyond the Lebanon mountains as far as the great Euphrates River. All of this is the land which I, the Lord, promised to give your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, and to their descendants. Go and occupy it." So the background to this is that in June 2010, I'd woken one morning with the thought that I wanted to leave my job in the civil service of nearly 40 years. In my mid-50s, I was nowhere near retirement age, but the more I thought and prayed about it, the more certain and excited I became. I realised that God had something hidden up his sleeve, and strangely, I also had a sense of freedom because I knew that everything was in God's hands. By August, I decided I'd leave work at the end of March 2011. My colleagues were stunned as I was leaving with no plan and no form of income for the foreseeable future, something civil servants and people of my age didn't do. In October, out of the blue, I was told about the possibility of a retirement package. No enhancements in the offer, only 2 weeks to decide whether to apply, and if accepted, I'd have to leave work at the end of January, 2 months earlier than planned. But I applied. By December, though, I was getting a bit jittery waiting for the decision. I was praying and asked God, even if I don't get the retirement package, shall I still leave work? Is it still plan A? For me, the answer came very clearly in these verses from Deuteronomy. And perhaps this raises questions for you. How does the Bible speak to you? Are you listening? And how do you listen? But why did I think the verses spoke to me? Because I had already come to the conclusion with peace and excitement that it was time to move on from my job and that God was leading me in this. The words, "You have stayed long enough at this mountain, break camp and move on," were an affirmation, not a command. I'd always wanted to travel around Europe on trains and buses, and a journey was mentioned in the verses. So how did they speak to me? The description of the journey that God gave to Moses resonated, not regarding the place names, country of the Amorites, the Jordan Valley, land of Canaan, etc., but the description of the terrain, the land itself. I was planning to go to the hills of northern Spain, then surrounding regions, down through Portugal as far as Lisbon to the wide River Tagus, eastwards across the lowlands and plains to the cities of Madrid and Barcelona, along the southern region of France to the Mediterranean coast, islands and beyond. There was a rhythm in the biblical description that spoke to me. And again, I felt as if it was that God was not only affirming my plans, but was in my travels and as excited as me. I did get my retirement package and I did go travelling in Europe, but that wasn't the end of God's plans. Verse 8 says, "All of this is the land which I, the Lord, promised to give you to your ancestors. Go and occupy it." And I couldn't quite fathom this out. But little did I know that 18 months later, I would be working in Europe as a tour manager. Not only that, but I'd be doing this work for the following 11 years, taking hundreds of people from the UK on holiday by train to all the countries I'd visited and many more, meeting locals, building relationships with those in the travel industry, and having a number of unexpected God conversations. It wasn't always easy, it was a huge responsibility, and there were many times my small group got urgent requests for prayer. In fact, after my first tour, I described my experience along the lines of, I've been a trolley dolly, a nurse, and great at counting. I counted them out and I counted them back in. So I wasn't occupying the land in the biblical sense of living there, but the frequency of my travels and reoccurring meetups with local people was regular enough to give that sense of familiarity and establish connections. As I said, I'd always wanted to travel, but I'd also wanted to be a tour manager, which is another story. But I came one almost by accident, having forgotten it was a hidden desire. In addition, if I had not received the retirement package, I could not have done the job because it wasn't a financially viable source of income on its own. So these verses are amazing to me in their clarity, longevity, and sense of God's involvement in my life. Praise the Lord. It may be that these verses speak to some of you here today, but remember that we are all on a journey, and journeys can be metaphorical rather than physical. So just do a rain check with God before you set out.